Have you ever woken up on a sunlit Saturday, hearing the gentle hum of life in your home, and thought, maybe this is it, the happiness I've always searched for? My name is Olivia Carter, and on this particular morning in Denver, I believed I was living my dream. The light spilling through our kitchen windows painted the walls gold, the scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, and for a moment everything felt just right. It's funny how the smallest moments, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the promise of a quiet weekend, can make you believe you finally belong somewhere. I grew up in the rolling hills of Vermont, raised by my mother, a woman who worked 2 jobs and carried hope like a torch through every storm. She taught me strength, yes, but also the ache of longing for a bigger family. Loud dinners, crowded rooms, laughter echoing down the hallway. When I met Michael, I saw in him not just a partner, but the possibility of that joyful chaos. Our love was simple, like the houses we used to sketch together on napkins, modest, sturdy, filled with dreams only we understood. Michael is the kind of man who remembers to refill your coffee before you ask who leaves notes in your lunch on days he knows will be hard. He's a high school teacher, the sort who can turn a lesson on the Civil War into a story about resilience. With him, I thought I'd finally built the foundation I'd always wanted: a home that would welcome everyone, a place where our family could put down roots and grow season after season. But every dream, no matter how carefully built, has its cracks. There were moments, quiet, fleeting, when I felt the shadow of doubt slip through the cracks in our foundation. Michael's family is different from mine. His mother, Donna, carries her own storms in the tight set of her jaw, and his younger sister, Brittany, has a way of commanding every room, her laughter sometimes sharp as glass. I tried to believe that love could smooth out any rough edge, that patience and kindness could turn strangers into family. Still, there were times I felt like a guest in my own home, measuring every word, second-guessing every choice. I'd spend hours planning the perfect dinner, only to have Donna gently suggest another way to set the table. Brittany would roll her eyes at my playlists or complain about the Wi-Fi, and I would laugh it off, telling myself these things didn't matter. But even the smallest cuts can leave scars if you're not careful. That morning, as I sipped my coffee and looked out at the little garden we planted last spring, I promised myself to hold on to hope. Our life was far from perfect, but I believed deep down that we were building something real, something worth fighting for. I didn't know, as I traced the rim of my mug and watched the steam rise in the gentle sunlight, that everything was about to change. Because just beyond that calm, hidden in a single sentence, a simple request, was a storm I never saw coming. And what happened next would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the courage it takes to claim your place in your own story. I was halfway through folding laundry when Michael walked in, holding his phone a little too tightly. There was something different in the way he cleared his throat, hesitant, almost rehearsed. "Liv, can we talk a minute?" he asked, not quite meeting my eyes. I nodded, bracing myself for another one of those small, harmless requests. Maybe dinner with his mother, or helping Brittany set up her influencer photos in our backyard again. Instead, Michael took a deep breath and delivered his news in a single careful sentence. "Mom and Brittany are coming to stay with us for a few days. Brittany's doctor says she needs quiet, and she thinks being around you makes her more nauseous." The words stung more than I let on. I tried to steady my voice as a familiar ache crept into my chest. "So, you want me to leave our home?" I managed, fighting the urge to laugh at how surreal it sounded. Michael fumbled with the hem of his shirt, trying to explain. "It's just for a few days, Liv. Britt's having a rough pregnancy, and Mom thinks you being here makes it harder on her. Maybe you could visit your mom in Vermont for the weekend." Just to keep things calm, I stared at him, wondering how keeping things calm had suddenly become my responsibility, and what it meant for the home we'd built together. This wasn't the first time I'd been expected to shift, adapt, or simply step aside for the comfort of someone else. I remembered last Christmas when Donna decided she couldn't sleep on our guest bed and asked me to swap rooms, or the spring before when Brittany commandeered my reading nook for her vlogging studio. In each case, I told myself it was just a small sacrifice for family harmony, but small sacrifices add up, especially when no one notices how much you're giving away. In America, we prize independence and personal space, but inside families, those lines can blur faster than you expect. I thought about friends of mine who'd shared similar stories. One had to leave her own apartment because her boyfriend's brother needed a place to crash. Another spent months living out of a suitcase, so her in-laws could have her bedroom just for a while. It's a quiet, common struggle, this sense of being temporarily displaced in your own life, with no guarantee you'll be fully welcomed back. I realized standing there in the soft morning light that the real lesson wasn't about being flexible or easygoing. Sometimes keeping the peace means losing your sense of home and learning how to speak up for your place in it. As Michael looked at me searching for reassurance, I knew I couldn't just nod along this time. Something inside me shifted an insistence that my comfort mattered too. I didn't have the words yet, but I promised myself I'd find them. And as the air between us settled into an uneasy quiet, I understood this moment wasn't just about a weekend or a spare room. It was about what I was willing to stand for. Because if you never say no, you might wake up one day and realize you've been asked to give up far more than you ever intended. The lesson lingered with me, heavy but clarifying, as I prepared for what came next, the decision that would change everything. As I stood by the window watching a robin dart between branches, memories of other small sacrifices washed over me. Over the years, I'd learned to swallow my words and keep the peace, convincing myself it was only temporary, only for family. There was the time Donna quietly rearranged all my kitchen cabinets while I was at work, insisting it would make things easier for everyone. Or Brittany borrowing my favorite throw blanket for a weekend getaway and never returning it. Each moment felt trivial on its own, but like drops of water they wore away at my sense of belonging, until I sometimes wondered whose home this truly was. I remembered the Thanksgiving when, after hours preparing my mother's apple pie recipe, Donna took one polite bite, smiled thinly, and suggested maybe next time I could try less cinnamon. Brittany, meanwhile, announced to her followers that our decor was cute, but super basic. I laughed along, brushing aside the sting, grateful at least for their presence, desperate to fit in. These moments became part of a pattern, a silent agreement where I minimized myself so others could shine. I told myself that was love, to bend, to blend in, to never cause a ripple. But inside my spirit grew quieter, edged with doubt. It's a story I've heard from so many women wives, daughters-in-law, even friends moving in with new roommates. There's always someone who sacrifices their favorite spot on the couch, their turn to choose dinner, or their treasured quiet time so others can feel more at home. We do it in the name of harmony, out of hope that if we give enough, we'll finally earn our place at the table. But giving up your voice bit by bit only teaches others that your needs are negotiable. Over time, you stop asking even when it matters most. And that's how slowly invisibility grows between the walls you call your own. Looking back, I realized the biggest mistake wasn't letting Donna rearrange my pantry or Brittany critique my curtains. It was believing that keeping the peace always meant keeping silent. I never once asked, what about what I want? Or can we find a way that works for everyone? Instead, I let tiny wounds pile up, resentments I packed away and labeled as just being accommodating. No one teaches us that boundaries are an act of love, not war. But the longer I let mine fade, the harder it became to find my own voice in a house that echoed with everyone else's. That afternoon, as sunlight slipped across the kitchen floor, I promised myself I'd try a different way. I wanted more than just to be included. I wanted to be truly seen. Maybe it was time to believe that my comfort and happiness were just as important as anyone else's. And maybe by speaking up, I could offer an example to anyone who'd ever felt like a guest in their own life. I didn't know how Donna or Brittany would react. I only knew the first step toward real belonging is learning to claim your space, no matter how small. And with that, I prepared myself for what honesty might bring. In the quiet moments before sleep, I'd press my hand to my belly, wondering how a secret so beautiful could feel so heavy. Just a week earlier, I'd learned I was pregnant, a tiny spark of life that I hadn't yet shared with Michael. I imagined telling him in some joyful way, maybe with a little pair of socks wrapped in ribbon or a handwritten card slipped into his lunchbox. But now, with the tension swirling in our home, my news felt too fragile to bring into the open. It was a strange ache holding hope alone, quietly protecting a joy I longed to celebrate together. Carrying a secret, especially one wrapped in hope and fear, can be lonelier than anyone admits. I found myself searching Michael's face for a reason to speak, waiting for the perfect moment that never seemed to come. At times, I'd wonder if other women had felt this same hollow longing, wanting to shout their happiness from the rooftops, but instead whispering it to the stars at night. In online forums, I read posts from mothers-to-be who delayed sharing their news, fearing judgment, disapproval, or simply the wrong reaction at the wrong time. The loneliness of waiting for the world to feel safe is a burden too many hearts quietly carry. It's easy to imagine that big life changes should always be marked by fanfare and celebration. But in reality, many of our biggest moments arrive during everyday chaos. Laundry piles, tense silences, the echo of other people's needs drowning out our own. I thought of friends who had waited weeks to tell their partners about a new job, a health scare, or a dream finally coming true. Not out of deceit, but out of hope for the right moment. But sometimes the right moment doesn't come. Sometimes you have to create it yourself, even if your hands are shaking and your voice is small. The lesson I began to see was that joy doesn't need perfect conditions to be real. Life rarely offers us flawless timing or a quiet stage to unveil our dreams. If we wait for everyone else to be ready, we risk letting our own happiness wither in the dark. Holding on to my secret, I realized I needed to honor my excitement, even if I couldn't control the storm gathering around me. My mother used to say, "Don't dim your light just because others are squinting." I whispered those words to myself as comfort, a promise that my joy deserved space, even in uncertain times. As the sun set, painting long golden stripes across our bedroom, I knew I couldn't wait much longer. My secret was part of me, and it deserved to be known. No matter how tangled our family had become, or how crowded our house would soon feel, this was my story too. Tomorrow I would find the courage to speak not just for myself, but for the tiny life depending on me to claim a place in this world. With that, I drifted to sleep, heart pounding, already rehearsing the words that would change everything. The morning sun filtered weakly through our blinds, casting pale stripes across the comforter as I rehearsed the words in my head. When Michael entered the kitchen, his expression anxious and tired, I realized there would never be a perfect time to tell him the truth or share how much his request had hurt me. My hands shook as I set down my mug, but I drew a steady breath and met his eyes. "Michael, I need you to listen. Not as Brittany's brother, not as Donna's son, but as my husband. I deserve to feel safe and valued in my own home too." He looked startled, not used to my voice so clear and unwavering. I continued explaining how each small sacrifice, giving up room's meals, even my quiet, had built into something heavier than either of us realized. "It's not just about a weekend," I said softly. "It's about always being the one expected to bend." For a moment, Michael struggled to answer, glancing at the wedding photo on the fridge. In that silence, I gathered my courage. I told him about the baby, my voice trembling, as I described how I dreamed of sharing this joy together, not alone, not hidden. He sat down heavily, the realization slowly sinking in. Tears threatened at the edges of my vision, but I pressed on. "If we want this family to grow strong, I need to know that you're on my side, even when it's hard. I can't keep moving out of the way so someone else feels comfortable. We chose this life, this home together. I need you to fight for us." It was a truth I had avoided for too long, fearing confrontation, hoping patience would earn me respect. But sometimes silence just invites more sacrifice. As I spoke, I remembered stories friends had shared about spouses who learned sometimes too late that trying to please everyone meant losing the person they loved most. One friend confided that her marriage only turned around after she stopped apologizing for having needs. "No one can stand up for your happiness but you," she'd told me. It was advice I finally understood. The lesson became clear: love isn't just about giving, but about being brave enough to ask for what you need and believing you're worth the fight. The kitchen was quiet, heavy, with everything left unsaid, but lighter somehow now that my truth was out. Michael reached across the table, taking my hand, his own voice thick with apology. We sat together, the morning slowly unfolding, both changed by words that couldn't be taken back. Deep inside, I sensed this was the first step, not just to saving our home, but to rediscovering myself. Tomorrow, Brittany and Donna would arrive, and this time I promised myself I wouldn't disappear to make room for everyone else. I was ready to stand my ground, whatever that meant. That afternoon, after the conversation with Michael, I wandered the backyard, letting the cool air clear my mind. My thoughts drifted back to Vermont, to the small apartment where I'd watched my mother work late nights and early mornings, sacrificing for our little family. She rarely complained, but her silences taught me that sometimes love looks like endurance. Maybe that's where I learned to equate patience with virtue, to quietly shoulder discomfort and trust that others would eventually notice my effort. But the truth is, when you never voice your needs, most people simply assume you're happy to keep giving. Michael had grown up differently. In his family, Donna ran the household with a confident hand, her opinions the final word in every decision. Brittany learned early to demand what she wanted, her childhood stories, full of bold requests and stubborn refusals. I used to envy that kind of certainty, wishing I could say no as easily as Brittany did, or advocate for myself the way Donna did for her children. Instead, I became the mediator, the peacemaker, always smoothing over tension and hoping everyone could get along. It's a role many women fall into, one that feels generous, but often leads to quiet resentment. I remembered a close friend, Hannah, who once confessed she'd spent years adapting her life around her husband's extended family. It started with small things, changing holiday plans, making meals I didn't like, until I realized I was living someone else's version of home, she said. Hannah's story echoed my own in so many ways. These invisible compromises rarely make headlines, but they chip away at confidence, one silent agreement at a time. The fear of disappointing others or being labeled difficult is powerful, strong enough to keep us quiet, even when our hearts ache for more. As I walked among the budding flowers, I realized how old wounds shape the way we love and set boundaries. We're taught that giving is noble, but we're rarely told that receiving or simply asking is an act of courage. The real danger isn't in a single sacrifice, but in never expecting anything in return. I thought about what I wanted to model for my own child, that respect goes both ways, and that kindness doesn't mean erasing yourself. The lesson settled gently in my heart: if we don't teach others how to treat us, the world will happily decide for us. By the time I headed inside, I felt something new, a quiet resolve. My past had shaped me, yes, but it didn't have to define my future. Tomorrow would bring more challenges with Donna and Brittany's arrival, but I was determined to show up as myself, not just the peacekeeper. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rewrite your own story, one honest word at a time. As the house filled with the promise of evening, I began to prepare not just the guest rooms, but my own heart for the days ahead. The next morning arrived with a nervous flutter in my chest, the kind you get before an interview or a first day at a new job. I busied myself with making coffee and tidying the kitchen, steadying my hands as Donna's car pulled into the driveway. She entered briskly, her perfume preceding her, followed closely by Brittany, who cradled her baby bump with practiced drama. The energy in the house changed instantly, tense and sharp as fresh lemon. Donna wasted no time commenting on the stuffy air and moving to open windows without asking. Brittany eyed the breakfast spread and wrinkled her nose in theatrical discomfort. I took a breath and decided not to retreat. Instead, I met Donna's gaze and said warmly, "I know first trimesters can be rough, Brittany. I'm actually going through it myself." Their surprise was palpable, a ripple of silence stretching across the kitchen. For the first time, I watched Brittany pause, uncertain. "You're pregnant?" she asked, voice softer than I expected. I nodded and smiled, keeping my tone light but firm. "Yes, and morning smells are hard for me too. So I'll need the kitchen clear while I eat if you don't mind." There it was, my first clear boundary spoken out loud. Donna pursed her lips, clearly unused to being redirected. She hesitated, glancing at Michael, who stood beside me, hands in his pockets. For a moment I feared old habits would resurface, my urge to placate, their urge to override. But this time I stood tall. "This is our home, and I'd like us all to feel comfortable, not just as guests but as family," I said. "That means respecting each other's space and routines." The words felt awkward on my tongue, but right in my heart. Setting boundaries didn't have to be harsh. Sometimes kindness is simply being clear about your needs. It's something I wish I'd learned sooner. So many women I know share stories of hosting holidays they didn't want, giving up their favorite seats, or saying yes to keep the peace. We're taught that good means agreeable, but real respect is born from honesty, not silence. The moment we claim our space politely, confidently, we invite others to treat us as equals. And while Donna and Brittany weren't suddenly transformed, I saw them pause, recalibrate, and for once, truly see me. Sometimes a single boundary can shift the entire atmosphere of a room. As the morning unfolded, we navigated breakfast with unexpected civility. Donna offered to help with the dishes. Brittany asked about my due date. The change was small but meaningful, a gentle nudge toward mutual respect. I realized then that standing my ground wasn't just for me, it was for our future family too. The lesson was clear: every time you speak your truth, you make more room for yourself and those you love. As the kitchen filled with sunlight, I sensed that bigger changes might be possible, one honest conversation at a time. After breakfast, the air in the house shifted again, as if everyone sensed a line had been drawn. Michael was quieter than usual, lingering at the sink, as Donna and Brittany drifted into the living room. I watched him, wondering if he felt the same weight I did, the old tug-of-war between keeping peace and standing firm. For years, Michael had been the easygoing son, the brother who smoothed over conflict, never wanting anyone to feel left out. But now, with a baby on the way, and our home in the balance, something in his posture seemed to change. He looked at me with a question in his eyes, and I saw a battle playing out behind them. We talked quietly at the kitchen table, sunlight slanting through the blinds. Michael admitted he was torn, afraid that standing up to his mother and sister would mean hurting them or fracturing the family he'd always relied on. I listened, remembering stories I'd heard from friends like Emily, whose husband finally set boundaries with his family only after years of conflict, or Daniel, who regretted waiting so long to put his marriage first. You can't keep everyone happy forever, I told Michael gently. But if you don't protect what's yours, you risk losing it. Michael nodded, eyes shining with emotion. He shared memories of his childhood, of Donna always stepping in, of Brittany's endless needs. For him, pleasing his family felt like love until now, when love for me and our baby meant learning to choose. I've been scared to disappoint them, he admitted, but I'm even more scared to lose us. It was the first time I heard him voice his fears so clearly. In that moment, I realized we were both learning something new. Sometimes loyalty isn't about saying yes, but about having the courage to say no when it counts. As the afternoon wore on, Donna tried to reclaim her old role, offering advice about pregnancy, organizing our cabinets again. But this time, Michael stepped in with a gentle firmness I hadn't seen before. "Thanks, Mom," he said, "but we've got it covered. Olivia's way works for us." The look on Donna's face was a mix of surprise and grudging respect. Brittany, too, seemed to take notice, offering to help with lunch, rather than criticizing. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a series of small choices, each one reinforcing that our home, our family, would now be shaped by mutual respect. That evening, after everyone settled down, Michael reached for my hand. "I choose you," he whispered. Relief and gratitude flooded through me. The lesson was simple, but powerful. True partnership means putting each other first, even when it's uncomfortable or unfamiliar. As we sat together, I felt a new strength between us, a sense that going forward we could face any challenge as a team. The hardest words had been spoken, and now finally, we could begin to build something stronger. Tomorrow there would be new routines and perhaps even more growing pains. But for the first time, I truly felt we were in this together. The days that followed felt different, not perfect but honest in a way I hadn't known before. Donna still brought her opinions, and Brittany's moods shifted with every morning. But there was a new sense of respect in the air. I started naming what I needed, even in small ways. "I'd love a quiet hour in the afternoon," I'd say. Or, "Let's try this recipe together," instead of me cooking alone. At first there was awkwardness, even resistance. But I realized that boundaries once spoken aloud don't just protect you. They invite others to share responsibility for the relationship too. One afternoon, Brittany surprised me by asking if we could walk together. As we wandered the neighborhood, she confessed how anxious she was about becoming a mom, how she often hid her insecurities behind criticism. "You always seem so steady, Olivia," she said quietly. It struck me that we'd both been performing versions of ourselves, her as the confident sister, me as the endlessly agreeable host. For the first time, we spoke as equals, not rivals. That conversation shifted something in me. Sometimes asserting your needs gives others permission to show their own softness and fears. Donna, too, changed in small ways. She still folded towels her way, but she also asked, "Is this how you like them?" I caught her watching me with a kind of curious respect, as if reevaluating her place in our home. I learned that boundaries don't have to create distance. In fact, they're invitations to learn and adapt together. Michael, for his part, kept his promise. He checked in with me, took on more chores, and made sure I never felt outnumbered. Our teamwork grew, not because life was suddenly easy, but because we trusted each other enough to speak honestly. A friend once told me that peace in a family doesn't mean the absence of conflict, but the presence of trust and flexibility. Looking back, I see how true that is. Setting boundaries doesn't mean closing your heart. It means making space for everyone, yourself included, to be real and imperfect. I found myself letting go of old grudges, meeting Donna and Brittany halfway, knowing they too were learning. Each small effort built a foundation for something lasting, a family that wasn't just polite on the surface, but genuinely supportive underneath. As the week drew to a close, our home felt lighter. There were still disagreements, but also laughter, shared meals, and moments of real connection. I realized that healing doesn't always arrive with a grand gesture. Sometimes it's found in daily choices, gentle conversations, and the willingness to try again. With the baby on the way, I felt hopeful, not just for myself, but for all of us. The storm had passed, and in its wake, we had a chance to begin anew. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but I was ready, heart open, for whatever came next. Looking back, I see how each step of this journey shaped not just our family, but the way I see myself. There were moments I felt invisible, swallowed by old habits, silenced by the hope of keeping peace. But in claiming my space, in voicing my needs and dreams, I learned that true love isn't about shrinking to fit someone else's idea of belonging. It's about growing together, finding courage and vulnerability, and building a home where every voice matters. Our family story, messy as it is, taught me that conflict can be the soil where understanding and respect begin to grow. What surprised me most was how honesty, even when awkward or uncomfortable, opened the door for real connection. By sharing my fears, my joy, and my boundaries, I invited Michael, Donna, and Brittany to meet me where I truly was, not as the perfect hostess, but as a real partner, daughter-in-law, and soon-to-be mother. In those honest conversations, we found forgiveness, laughter, and new ways to support each other. I discovered that sometimes the smallest acts, asking for help, admitting uncertainty, can lead to the biggest changes in a family. This journey was never about winning or losing, but about creating a life that feels authentic and safe. For anyone who's ever felt like a guest in their own home, I hope you know you're not alone. It's not selfish to want respect, to carve out your own corner, or to ask your loved ones to truly see you. The lessons I learned about patience, assertiveness, and letting go of old wounds are ones I hope to pass on to my child and to anyone still finding their voice in the chaos of family life. As I prepare for this new chapter, becoming a mother, growing our family, and nurturing the love we've fought so hard to protect, I am grateful for every stumble and every triumph. The oak tree outside our window, planted in shaky soil but growing stronger. Every season reminds me that resilience and tenderness can coexist. We're all works in progress, and every day brings another chance to listen, to try again, and to choose each other. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your own journey in the comments. Like, subscribe, and join our community, because every voice deserves to be heard, and every family has a story worth telling. Together we can learn to stand up for ourselves and for each other, one honest conversation at a time. Thank you for walking with me. Here's to new beginnings and to the courage it takes to make any house a home.